From your local election headquarters, this is Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Okay, welcome back to Big Country Politics. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Paul Fabrizio, our political expert at McMurray University. We're talking about Steve Savage's spot on the city council. He hasn't been showing up to city council meetings. He said he's moved on. He's got another project. He's not worrying about getting reelected. We've discussed that. We've discussed that you see Steve Savage. You guys are friends. You can get together and every once in a while, so let's get that out of the way. But so now I want to talk about the city council itself and that spot. It's an empty spot. How does that affect voting in city council? I know sometimes that a vote will require a supermajority, which means most of them or all of them have to vote yes on an issue.
Right, but that's a very rare occasion. So the reality is that on most ordinary votes, it's simply going to be a simple majority. And so you'll have the other members who are there, they'll be able to achieve that. It would be a very rare occasion where...
Would that affect it anyway? I mean, would that be just like that doesn't exist and then they would count those who are there as the supermajority? Or...
I don't know the answer to that,
okay,
unfortunately.
We'll have to find that out.
That's something we're going to have to find out. But there's always a possibility now, because there would be 6 people, that you could end up in a 3-3 tie. So the absence of any one member, of course, hurts the council as a whole. And that's the whole thing. I mean, we elect people to serve. I think they should be serving and not stepping away. He's doing it for his own reasons. So, but still, there is always a potential that we could have a 3-3 tie. And that's not good. If it gets up to the city council, you want a decision. And you can't do that possibly if you have a 3-3 tie.
We have, last question on city council, we have a good number of people, I'm assuming, that have filed to run for city council, Savage's spot and Kyle McAllister's spot. How many, and I know you can't get into their minds, those who have filed to run for Kyle McAllister's spot, how much of that is a reaction to all the controversy that surrounded that, you think?
I mean, without interviewing everybody, I don't know the answer. It's hard to say. But I think there was a sense before the Kyle McAllister questions came up about the Facebook post that he was a shoo-in for re-election. And the focus was going to be on Steve Savage's spot, because that would be the open spot. So I would have been, if we'd been talking in December about this, I would have been surprised if anybody had challenged Kyle McAllister, because he was there, he was known, he was doing his job, and largely without controversy. That all changed in the new year. And then his became a really interesting seat, and we'll see what's going to happen. And, you know, Steve Savage stepping away from the city council creates an opening. And anytime there's an opening, it's an opportunity for people to step up. And so far, several people have.
We've talked about local, and this will stay local. I want to talk about, I saw a picture of you a couple of weeks ago on Facebook. You were in Washington. Tell us what you were doing there.
I am part of an organization called Area Health Education Centers here, and what our focus is on is finding people who will work in rural medical care.
This is a big issue right now.
It is a huge issue. You're more likely to die in rural areas of this country than in urban or suburban areas of this country, and most of it has to do with the lack of health care. And so there's things that the federal government can do. So last week I was in Washington, D.C. as part of the National Rural Health Association, and we were there one day to hear from politicians, and the next day to go to the congressional offices, the Senate offices, and say, hey, you need to know that rural areas exist, and you need to spend some time focusing on them. And we need to do things through federal legislation that could benefit rural hospitals. And so that's what we were there for.
Because it's not just the building, having a hospital there. It's actually getting doctors, nurses, people to move into that community and serve the people who live there.
Exactly. And the opposite is what happens when a rural hospital closes. If you're in a town and the hospital closes, a lot of the reason for staying in that town disappears. So when a hospital closes, businesses start to go away, the school system goes down, and eventually a town can disappear.
I didn't think about it. It really acts like an anchor.
Yeah, so it's not only an anchor, it's a key to economic development. And so if we want to keep rural areas alive and well, we need to make sure there's medical care. And you know, Congressman Jody Arrington has really emerged as a champion of this thing. He said, this is something we need to focus on. He was actually given an award at this national conference for his involvement in the issue. And then he met with those of us from West Texas and talked some more about what he wants to accomplish. And it's really, we need to focus on providing access to health care for people who live in rural areas.
I know that they're doing stuff like you lure a doctor over to your rural hospital by maybe paying for their student loans.
Exactly.
Or paying for housing. They're getting creative.
Right. And you also have to, you know, sell them on a rural lifestyle and say, look, it's going to be different than living in the city. And it turns out that the most effective recruits for rural medical centers are people who grew up in rural areas. And, you know, they often want to get away and go and see what the big city is like. But if we can get them back into rural areas, it's really, really helpful. So that's what we need. We need more people, more medical providers, and not just doctors and nurses, but physicians' assistants. We need occupational therapists, the whole gamut.
Everything.
Everything to keep those hospitals going.
Dr. Paul Fabrizio with McMurray University, our political expert. I always feel like we don't have enough time with you. We'll have to have you back on, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. We'll be back on Big Country Politics.